She worked 3 jobs, slept on a sagging futon in a studio apartment no bigger than a parking space, and raised her 6-year-old son on prayers and pocket change. He owned a penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, ran a $4 billion hospitality fund, and had more money than he could ever spend. But when she walked into his penthouse for a job interview and did something no candidate had ever done before, both of their lives were altered forever. How did one single mother with nothing on her resume except calluses on her palms earn a billionaire's trust not with words, but with a wrench? Stay with me, because this story will change the way you see the people society overlooks. This is the story of Elena Ross, a woman who proved that character is not written on a resume. It is written in what you do when no one is watching. It was a freezing Tuesday evening in Manhattan. The wind blew off the Hudson River like a blade, reflecting streetlight glares on the wet pavement. High above the city, on the 54th floor of a glass tower in Tribeca, a penthouse sat quietly in the dark. The marble floors were cold, and the walls were made almost entirely of glass, giving a view that most people only saw in magazines. The furniture was modern, clean, and expensive. Everything was in its place, perfect, and completely empty. A coffee machine hummed softly in the kitchen, an Italian machine that cost more than a used car. It brewed a perfect cup every time, but there was only one mug sitting beside it. There was always only one mug. Marcus Vance stood by the window looking out at the city below. He was 36 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with deep bronze skin and a shaved head that made him look older than he was. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and sweatpants. No watch, no shoes, just a man standing alone in a room that was too big for one person. Marcus was the CEO of Vance Hospitality Ventures, one of the most successful commercial real estate and culinary investment firms in the country. His company bought old, rundown properties, renovated them, and established high-end venues alongside affordable community dining spaces. Balancing luxury with accessible food programs was his signature business model. Marcus had started with nothing. He grew up on the west side of Philadelphia. His mother, Gloria, worked 2 jobs as a prep cook to keep the lights on. His father left when Marcus was 3. Gloria raised him alone in a 1-bedroom apartment where the radiator pipes rattled every winter, and the landlord never fixed them. She died when Marcus was 15. A heart attack on the grease-stained diner floor while making dinner. Marcus found her. He sat in the hospital waiting room alone because there was no one else to call. After that, Marcus made himself a promise. He would never be powerless again. He would build something so big that no one could ever take it from him. By 26, he had his first 10 million. By 36, his net worth had crossed the $1 billion mark. Forbes wrote about him, and business schools studied his model. He had everything the world said a man should want. But tonight, Marcus was just tired. Tired of meetings, handshakes, and people who smiled at him because of what he had, not who he was. He took a sip of his coffee and sat on the leather sofa. On the glass table sat a stack of 24 resumes, all printed on thick, expensive paper from graduates of Harvard, Yale, and Wharton. Every single one of them was perfect on paper. Perfect grades, internships, and references. Marcus had interviewed every single one of them over the past 3 weeks, and every single one had left him feeling empty. They all said the right things and smiled at the right times, but none of them were real. He was looking for an executive operations assistant, someone who would be with him in every facility audit, someone he could trust. And trust was the one thing Marcus could not find on a resume. He picked up a top resume from Yale. During the interview, Marcus had asked one question: what would you do if you saw a vital piece of machinery failing and no one asked you to fix it? The candidate had blinked and said, "I would report it to the appropriate maintenance department." Marcus had ended the interview right there. He did not want someone who reported problems. He wanted someone who fixed them. He just did not know how to explain that to his HR team. He leaned back and closed his eyes. The penthouse was silent. The coffee was getting cold. He did not know it yet, but the answer to everything he had been searching for was about to walk through his front door. The next morning, across the river in Jersey City, Elena Ross was already awake at 4:15 a.m. The alarm had not gone off yet. Her body had learned to wake up before the sun a long time ago. She sat up slowly on the sagging futon in her studio apartment. It was a narrow couch propped up by wooden blocks, because the only actual bed belonged to her 6-year-old son, Leo. The apartment smelled like old plaster and radiator steam. It was barely bigger than a parking space with thin walls, where you could hear the neighbors arguing. Elena stood up and stretched her aching back. She walked to the kitchen area and turned on the faucet. The water came out cold. The boiler had been broken for 2 weeks. She made a pot of cheap coffee, opened the fridge, and checked her food supply. Half a carton of milk, 3 eggs, and a box of cereal. She poured the cereal for Leo and cracked the eggs for herself. Elena worked 3 jobs. In the mornings, she cleaned industrial dish racks at a diner. In the afternoons, she sorted crates at a warehouse. In the evenings, she delivered food on a bicycle. Between shifts, she dropped Leo off with Mrs. Gable, a 72-year-old retired seamstress who lived down the hall. Mrs. Gable watched Leo for free, but Elena fixed things for her in return. A leaking pipe 1 week, a broken cabinet door the next. Whatever needed fixing, Elena fixed it. That was how they survived. Not with money, but with hands and trust. Elena knew how to fix things because her father, Thomas Ross, had taught her. He was a maintenance man in Newark for 35 years. His hands were rough, but his mind was sharp. Thomas raised Elena alone after her mother left. He taught her how to read a valve, fix a pump, and handle tools with patience. He used to say, "Fixing things is not about the metal, El. It is about paying attention." Most people do not break things on purpose. They just stop paying attention. Thomas died when Elena was 21, leaving her nothing but his old steel toolbox and a lifetime of knowledge. That toolbox sat in the corner of her apartment, right next to the futon. At 5 a.m., Leo woke up. "Morning, Mama," he said softly. "Morning, baby. Breakfast is on the table," Elena said. Elena checked her phone screen. On it was an address for a penthouse in Tribeca. She had applied online 3 days ago for an operations assistant job, no degree required. She had sent a short email explaining her hands-on experience, expecting no reply. But yesterday, a response came. "Come to this address Thursday at 10 a.m. Ask for Marcus Vance." Elena had searched his name and nearly dropped her phone, a billionaire. She looked at Leo and smiled quietly. Mama is going to try her best today. The next morning, Elena dropped Leo off at Mrs. Gable's door at 7:30 a.m. "You look nice," Mrs. Gable said, looking at Elena's thrifted navy slacks and ironed blouse. "Big interview in Manhattan," Elena said. She walked to the subway station. The morning air was sharp and cold. Her black flats had a small scuff on the toe that she had tried to cover with a black marker. The train ride to Manhattan took 25 minutes. Elena stood the whole way. When she came up from the station, the air felt cleaner and the buildings were taller. She found the building easily, a glass tower with a dark bronze awning. A doorman stood outside in a uniform. "Good morning," Elena said. "I have an appointment with Mr. Marcus Vance." The doorman looked at her thrifted clothes and scuffed shoes. "Name?" he asked flatly. "Elena Ross." He made a quick call, then pointed to the left. 54th floor, private elevator. Elena stepped into the elevator. As it rose, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The blouse ironed with a hot pot, the scuffed flats, the canvas purse with a wire zipper pull. She saw every struggle, but she also saw a woman who was still standing. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. The view of the river was breathtaking. But as Elena walked past the kitchen, toward the living area where Marcus was standing, she heard it. Drip. She slowed down. Drip. Her head turned toward the sink. It was a sound most people would ignore, but to Elena it was loud. A leaking faucet, a worn valve seat that an 80-cent seal could fix in minutes. Most people would have ignored it and sat down on the leather sofa. But Elena stopped walking. Marcus noticed and turned around. "Everything okay?" "Excuse me, Mr. Vance," Elena said. She walked straight to the sink, crouched down, and opened the cabinet beneath. Her eyes moved quickly over the pipes. She reached in, found the main water valve, and pulled a small 6-inch wrench from her purse. With a quick, practiced motion, she tightened the packing nut around the valve stem just enough to compress the seal. The dripping stopped. Complete silence. Elena stood up, wiped her hands on a tissue, and looked at Marcus calmly. "Sorry about that. The dripping was going to bother me the whole interview." Then she sat down on the leather sofa. Marcus did not move. He stood there, coffee cup in hand, staring at the woman who had just fixed his sink like it was nothing. He looked at her hands, working hands that had carried things, built things, and tightened a valve all in the same morning. In that moment, something shifted inside Marcus. 24 candidates with perfect resumes had sat on that sofa, and not one had heard the leak. Elena had seen a problem and fixed it without being asked. Marcus sat down across from her. The interview was already over. She had earned the job. Marcus placed his coffee cup on the glass table and sat down across from Elena. For a moment, he just looked at her, not at her thrifted slacks or her scuffed shoes, but at her face and her hands. He looked at her the way you look at someone who has just shown you something you were not expecting to see. "Tell me something that is not on your resume," he said softly. Lena let out a small, nervous laugh. "That would be easy, sir. There is nothing on my resume. I don't have one." Marcus tilted his head. "Nothing? I never needed one," Elena said honestly, meeting his gaze without shame. "The kind of jobs I work don't ask for resumes. They ask if you can show up on time and if your back is strong enough to carry heavy crates." Most people would have been embarrassed to admit that in a billionaire's penthouse. But Elena said it with absolute clarity, straight, simple, and true. Marcus nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Then tell me about yourself. Something real." Elena thought for a moment, looking down at her rough hands and the small scar on her thumb. "My father raised me. His name was Thomas Ross. He was a maintenance man in Newark for 35 years. He could fix anything: boilers, pumps, radiators, ovens. He taught me everything I know about tools and life." "He sounds like a good man," Marcus said. "He was the best man I ever knew," Elena said quietly. "He taught me that fixing things isn't about the metal. It's about paying attention. He used to say that most people don't break things on purpose. They just stop paying attention until everything collapses." The room went quiet. Marcus sat there, staring at her as if she had spoken the exact truth he had been searching for. Those simple words from an old maintenance man described precisely what was wrong with his company, his executive board, and his life. People around him had stopped paying attention. They showed up, said the right words, and managed spreadsheets. But they never saw what was broken right in front of them. "Elena," Marcus said, leaning forward, "I have interviewed over 20 people for this position. Graduates from Harvard, Yale, and Wharton with perfect grades and credentials. Not one of them heard my sink leaking." Elena blinked, unsure of how to respond. "Do you know why I hold interviews here instead of at my office?" Marcus continued. "Because an office is a performance space. People sit where you tell them, say what you want to hear, and leave. But a home tells the truth. You are the first person who walked in here and actually saw what was happening." He paused, looking at her steadily. "I can teach you software, filing, and scheduling in a few weeks. Those are just skills, and skills can be learned. But stepping up to fix something broken without being asked, that is character. And character cannot be taught." Elena held her breath. "Mr. Vance, I should be honest. I don't have a college degree. I don't know how to use complex office programs. I am not what you look for on paper. Marcus smiled a genuine warm smile. Paper is the last thing I am looking for. Can you start Monday as my executive operations liaison? The starting salary is $85,000 a year, with full health insurance for you and your son. Elena froze. $85,000. It was more than 4 times what she earned working 3 jobs combined. It meant proper food, a real bed for Leo, and heat that worked every winter night. Yet a deep, tired part of her, that had been let down too many times, felt a sudden rush of fear. "Can I think about it?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked surprised. No applicant had ever asked him for time to think. Everyone always said yes instantly. But Elena Ross was sitting on his leather sofa, looking at a life-changing opportunity and asking for time to process it. "Take all the time you need," Marcus said softly. Elena rode the subway back across the river in a haze. The noise of the city rattled around her, but her mind was spinning. People like Marcus Vance don't give chances like this to people like me for free. She thought. There is always a price. She remembered her last supervisor at the warehouse, who had promised her a full-time management position with benefits if she worked double shifts for 6 months. She had worked until her back throbbed, only for him to give the job to his brother-in-law without a second thought. She had learned that corporate promises were often just empty words used to take advantage of hard-working people. When she unlocked her apartment door, Mrs. Gable was sitting on the sagging futon with Leo, reading a picture book. "Mama!" Leo cheered, running to wrap his arms around her waist. Elena hugged her son tight, smelling the faint scent of crayons and soap. Mrs. Gable looked up with a knowing smile. "Did you get the job?" "He offered it to me," Elena whispered. "A real position, an office salary." Mrs. Gable's eyes widened. "He offered you the job, and you're standing there looking terrified? It feels too good, Mrs. Gable," Elena said, setting her purse on the counter. "Things that feel this good usually end badly." Mrs. Gable stood up slowly with her cane and walked over to take Elena's hands. "Child, you have been fixing everyone else's problems your whole life, your father's house, my plumbing, this whole building. When are you going to let something good happen to you?" That night, after putting Leo to bed, Elena lay on the futon and stared at the dark ceiling. She looked at her father's steel toolbox sitting in the corner, dented and quiet. She picked up her phone, opened her messages, and typed 6 words. "I will be there on Monday." Monday morning came fast. At 8:00 a.m., Elena arrived at the 38th floor of Vance Hospitality Ventures on 6th Avenue. The office was all glass, bright lights, and loud keyboards. People in expensive suits walked briskly, talking about budgets and projections. An HR assistant gave Elena a badge, a laptop, and a company phone, pointing her to a workstation right outside Marcus's corner office. Elena sat in the ergonomic chair and opened the laptop screen. It lit up with program icons she had never seen before. Outlook, Excel, SAP, and Slack. It looked like a foreign language. For the first time, Elena felt real fear. Not the fear of physical fatigue, but the fear of failing at an opportunity she desperately needed. Down the hall, Renee Whitfield, the senior director of operations, stepped out of her office. She wore a sharp black blazer and carried a tablet. She glanced at Elena as she passed, a quick, cold look that measured her instantly and came up short. A moment later, Elena heard Renee's sharp voice through Marcus's open door. "You hired a warehouse laborer with no corporate background to be your operational liaison? I hope you know what you're doing, Marcus." "I always know what I'm doing, Renee," Marcus replied calmly. "She doesn't know the software yet, but she will learn. She has an operational mind that your spreadsheets can't measure." Elena sat very still at her desk. Her hands were shaking, but she placed them on the keyboard anyway. She was not going to give up. The first week was brutal. On Tuesday, Elena sent an email intended for accounting to a general distribution list, causing a minor panic over a confidential budget form. On Wednesday, she scheduled 2 site meetings at the exact same time, forcing Marcus to reschedule with a regional partner. On Thursday, she misprinted a 60-page logistics report on the wrong paper tray. By Friday, Elena had made 8 mistakes. She wrote every single one of them down in a small notebook she kept in her purse. She tracked her errors meticulously so she could ensure they never happened again. Every night after work, Elena took the train home, fed Leo, put him to bed, and sat on her sagging futon with her phone. She watched online tutorials until 1:30 a.m., learning how to create spreadsheets, schedule calendar invites, and write formal memos. She took notes on the back of grocery receipts, practicing until her eyes burned with fatigue. By the 3rd week, her mistakes dropped to 1. By the end of the month, she was navigating the supply database with quiet efficiency. She learned fast, worked hard, and paid attention to every detail. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning at 9:15 a.m., disaster struck. Elena was organizing maintenance records at her desk when she heard frantic shouting from the main lobby downstairs. She stood up and looked through the glass wall. Security guards were running toward the stairwell, talking urgently into their radios. Elena walked down the emergency stairs to the ground floor. When she pushed open the stairwell door, she stopped in her tracks. Water was gushing across the polished granite floor of the main lobby in a wide, steady wave, pouring out from beneath the basement utility door. Renee Whitfield was standing near the entrance, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp with panic. "What do you mean the maintenance team is stuck in traffic? We have foreign investors arriving in 30 minutes. The main lobby is flooding." She hung up and turned to Marcus, who had just come down the stairs. "A secondary cooling line in the basement ruptured," Renee reported frantically. "They say it's a main supply valve failure. Water is rising fast." Marcus looked at the rising water. In less than 30 minutes, an international investor group was scheduled to walk through those doors to sign a $60 million deal. If the lobby was flooded, the meeting and the deal would be ruined. "Can we shut off the water?" Marcus asked. "Nobody knows where the main isolation valve is," Renee cried. "Building maintenance isn't here." While everyone was panicking and calling for help, Elena moved. She didn't ask for permission or wait for instructions. She pulled her shoes above her ankles, stepped straight into the shallow water, and pushed open the heavy basement door. The basement was dim, cold, and loud with the deafening roar of spraying water. Water was pooling rapidly across the concrete floor. Elena moved quickly through the dark hallway until she found the utility control room. Inside, the walls were covered in a complex grid of pipes, valves, and pressure meters. Most people would have seen pure chaos. Elena saw a system. She scanned the pipelines quickly, using the knowledge her father had passed down to her. In under 30 seconds, she located the primary red iron isolation wheel near the base of the main intake line. She grabbed the rusted handle with both hands and turned it clockwise with all her strength. The wheel was stiff, but Elena held her ground and forced it shut. The roaring water instantly stopped. The spraying ceased. Elena immediately checked the secondary lines and found the failure: a heavy brass coupling joint that had vibrated loose over time. She pulled her 6-inch wrench from her purse, aligned the joint, and tightened the coupling nut securely. Then, she slowly reopened the main valve. The pipe held. Not a single drop leaked. Elena wiped her hands on her slacks, placed her wrench back in her purse, and walked upstairs. When she stepped back into the lobby, the water had already stopped flowing, and cleanup crews were sweeping the floor. Elena walked quietly past the stunned crowd of staff, took the elevator back to the 38th floor, and sat at her desk to continue her work. 20 minutes later, the foreign investors arrived. The lobby was dry and clean. The meeting went perfectly, and the $60 million contract was signed. After the investors left, Marcus walked up to the 38th floor. Renee stood outside her office, looking at Elena with total shock. She went down there alone, found the main shutoff, and fixed the pipe in 18 minutes. Renee whispered. She saved the entire event. Marcus said nothing. He looked across the room at Elena, who was sitting quietly at her computer, typing her reports with steady, reliable hands. He realized then that this woman from Jersey City was the most incredible person he had ever met. Over the weeks that followed her repair of the main water pipe, something fundamental changed between Marcus and Elena. It was subtle at first, almost invisible to the rest of the corporate office, but it was unmistakably real. Elena was officially reassigned to the Facilities and Building Operations Department. Her new title was Facilities Operations Manager. It was a role that matched her practical skills perfectly. Inspecting building infrastructure, coordinating maintenance contractors, and verifying repair costs across Vance Hospitality's portfolio of properties. She was no longer managing Outlook calendars. She was managing physical systems, and she was exceptional at it from day one. Marcus began calling Elena into his office for more than just routine facility reports. On one crisp winter afternoon, he asked her to review a set of architectural floor plans for a new residential development in Lower Manhattan. The project aimed to combine commercial dining venues with affordable housing units for working families. "What do you think of these kitchen layouts?" Marcus asked, leaning over the large wooden desk. Elena studied the blueprints carefully, tracing the lines with her finger. "The design looks clean, Mr. Vance, but these storage spaces are impractical. A family living on a tight budget needs room to store bulk dry goods, and these plumbing access panels are sealed behind the drywall. If a valve leaks, a tenant will have to break the wall to fix a simple $10 pipe." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then picked up his desk phone and dialed his head architect. "Hold the final construction prints," he instructed firmly. "We are redesigning the utility access panels and expanding the pantry layouts based on operational feedback." He hung up and looked at Elena with a faint smile. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I just said what I know from living in those apartments, sir," Elena replied simply. "That is precisely why your perspective matters," Marcus said softly. As their professional dynamic grew stronger, Marcus began stopping by Elena's desk around noon, carrying 2 simple deli sandwiches. They would sit together in the quiet break room, talking about building logistics, childhood memories, and Leo's latest drawings from school. On weekends, Marcus even visited her small neighborhood in Jersey City, sitting on the floor with 6-year-old Leo to build tall wooden block towers and read bedtime stories in humorous character voices. However, as Elisa's influence within the company grew, so did the whispers. It started with subtle, cold glances in the hallway and quiet murmurs by the coffee machines. Within a month, malicious rumors spread through the executive suites like wildfire. "Have you seen how much time she spends in his office?" a senior marketing associate whispered outside the elevator bay. "She was a warehouse of worker 3 months ago. Now she's giving input on multi-million-dollar architectural designs." "She's sleeping with him," another colleague added quietly. "That's the only logical explanation. Fixing a pipe in the basement doesn't make someone a corporate strategist." The whispers were never spoken directly to Elena's face. They were always delivered behind her back, just loud enough for her to catch fragments of cold judgment as she walked past. "Gold digger. Opportunist. She's using him to climb the ladder." Elena heard the comments, but she never confronted anyone. She kept her spine straight, completed her facility inspections, and did her job with quiet dignity. But late at night, after putting Leo to bed in her small studio apartment, she would sit alone in the dark, listening to the radiator pipes clinking in the walls. The cruel words burned far deeper than any physical exhaustion ever had. 3 weeks later, Marcus invited Elena to an exclusive corporate gala held at an upscale venue in Tribeca. The dinner celebrated the closing, of the $60 million development deal and was attended by senior board members, private equity partners, and city officials. Marcus insisted on her attendance. "You saved that investor meeting with your own hands, Elena. You earned your seat at that table, and I want you there." Elena initially hesitated. She owned no formal attire suitable for an elite Manhattan gala. But Marcus had anticipated her predicament. He arranged for a modest, elegant navy blue evening dress to be delivered to her apartment. When Elena put it on and looked into her small bathroom mirror, she barely recognized herself. The gala was held in a grand hall decorated with crystal chandeliers, dark mahogany paneling, and soft candlelight. Wealthy executives and high society figures moved through the room in tailored tuxedos and designer gowns. Elena sat quietly at the main head table beside Marcus, keeping her posture perfect, smiling politely, and thanking the waiters as they served dinner. Then Victoria Langston entered the room. Victoria was a senior partner at an influential private equity firm and a prominent member of New York high society. She was also Marcus's former girlfriend. Wearing a stunning black designer gown that cost more than Elena's former annual earnings, Victoria made her way through the room, greeting guests with practiced elegance. When she reached the main table, Victoria's sharp eyes swept over Elena like a buyer inspecting a piece of second-hand furniture. "Marcus, darling, a magnificent event, as always," Victoria said smoothly, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. Then she turned her gaze directly onto Elena. "And who might this be?" "This is Elena Ross," Marcus introduced clearly, standing up. "She is our facilities operations manager." Victoria raised her dark eyebrows in mock surprise. "Operations manager? How fascinating." She picked up a champagne glass from the table and leaned in slightly. "Tell me, Miss Ross, which university did you attend for your business degree?" The immediate surrounding table fell into a tense, heavy silence. Several executives stopped talking to observe the interaction. Elena met Victoria's gaze without shrinking back. "I did not attend university, Miss Langston," Elena stated in a steady, clear voice. "I learned my profession working in commercial kitchens and maintenance shops." Victoria let out a soft, theatrical laugh that echoed across the table. Oh, how utterly refreshing. Marcus always did have a soft spot for charitable causes. The insult was precise, cruel, and unmistakable. A wave of intense embarrassment rushed through Elena's chest. She felt the sudden, overwhelming urge to melt into the floor, to run out of the grand hall, to disappear back into the quiet obscurity of her Jersey City apartment. Before Elena could speak, Marcus stepped forward. He did not raise his voice or make a dramatic scene. He simply placed his hand firmly on the back of Elena's chair and looked at Victoria with a cold, piercing intensity that chilled the surrounding air. "Elena Ross is not a charity case, Victoria," Marcus said, his deep voice carrying absolute authority across the silent table. "She possesses more practical integrity, technical capability, and true human dignity than most people in this room. I would trust her operational judgment with my life before I trusted anyone else with my business." Victoria's artificial smile faltered instantly. She opened her mouth to deliver a retort, but seeing the unwavering steel in Marcus's eyes, she turned on her heel and walked away without another word. The rest of the evening passed in a quiet blur. On the drive back across the river in Marcus's car, Elena stared out the passenger window at the passing city lights. "Thank you for what you said back there, Marcus," she said quietly, after a long silence. "I meant every word of it, Elena," Marcus replied softly, looking over at her. Elena let out a faint, sad breath. "I know you did, but it doesn't change reality, does it?" Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your world, Marcus," Elena said, turning to look at him with tears shimmering in her eyes. "The board members, the investors, the people at that dinner. They will never see me as an equal. No matter how many pipes I fix or how hard I work, I will always be the dishwasher girl to them. And as long as I stay by your side, Those whispers will tarnish your reputation, your company, and your standing. I don't care about their whispers, Elena, Marcus insisted firmly. I care, Marcus, Elena whispered, and I have to protect my son from growing up in the shadow of people's cruelty. That night, Elena could not sleep. She lay on her sagging futon in the dark, watching the pale orange glow of the street lamp illuminate her small studio apartment. She heard Victoria's mocking voice echoing in her mind. Charitable causes. She saw the cold judgment in the eyes of the corporate executives. She looked at her corporate security badge, lying on the small laminate table. She had been so proud the day she received it. But now she realized that staying at Vance Hospitality was placing an unfair burden on Marcus's reputation and opening her young son to endless public scrutiny. More than that, Elena confronted a terrifying truth in the quiet darkness. She was falling in love with Marcus Vance. She had tried to deny it, framing her emotions as professional gratitude, but her heart knew the truth. And because she loved him, she refused to be the flaw that cracked his empire. At 4 a.m., Elena stood up quietly. She took out a plain white sheet of paper and a pen. With a steady hand, she wrote 3 short sentences. "Thank you for believing in me, Mr. Vance. You gave me a chance when no one else would. But I do not belong in your world, and I refuse to let my presence damage everything you have built. Please find someone who fits your world better." She folded the letter neatly and placed it on her small table alongside her corporate laptop, company phone, and security badge. Then, she packed her father's heavy steel toolbox, her thrifted clothes, and Leo's small backpack. She gently woke her 6-year-old son, dressed him in his warm coat, and picked up her bags. At 5 a.m., before the winter sun could rise over the city, Elena Ross locked her apartment door, took her son by the hand, and walked away into the freezing morning air. Marcus arrived at the 38th floor of Vance Hospitality Ventures at 8:15 a.m. on Monday morning. The corporate office was already buzzing with its usual high-energy morning routine, keyboards clattering, phones ringing, and staff moving quickly between glass meeting rooms. Everything was in its designated place, perfect and pristine, except for one devastating anomaly. Elena's desk was completely empty. Marcus slowed his stride and stopped before the wooden workstation. Her corporate laptop sat centered on the desk, closed and dark. Beside it lay her enterprise smartphone, her security access badge face up, and a neatly folded sheet of white paper. Marcus reached out with a trembling hand, picked up the paper, and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the short, handwritten lines. "Thank you for believing in me, Mr. Vance. You gave me a chance when no one else would. But I do not belong in your world, and I refuse to let my presence damage everything you have built. Please find someone who fits your world better." Marcus stood frozen in the center of the bustling office, surrounded by 200 employees, and felt completely and utterly alone. He read that single line over and over again until the ink blurred before his eyes. "I do not belong in your world." A sharp, searing pain cracked open deep inside his chest, because those exact words echoed a ghost from his past. His mother, Gloria Vance, had repeated that exact sentence dozens of times throughout his childhood in Philadelphia. "People like us don't belong in nice places, Marcus. I'm just a prep cook. I don't belong where wealthy people live." Gloria had worked herself to death believing that lie, scrubbing floors, washing dish racks, and never believing she deserved a better life, until her heart gave out on a cold diner floor at 43 years old. Standing in a hospital hallway at 15, Marcus had sworn he would never let another human being he cared about be destroyed by the belief that they were not good enough. And now, Elena Ross was doing the exact same thing, disappearing into the shadows because a cruel world had convinced her she did not belong. Marcus folded the letter carefully, slid it into his inner jacket pocket, turned around, and walked straight back toward the private elevator. Renee Whitfield stepped out into the hallway with her tablet, ready to review the morning financial reports. She stopped when she saw the raw, intense anguish written across Marcus's face. "Marcus, what happened? Where are you going?" "The executive board convenes in 20 minutes. "She left, Renee," Marcus said, his voice quiet but shaking with emotion. She left a note and handed back her badge. Renee paused, looking at the empty workstation. "I'm sorry, Marcus, but perhaps it's for the best." Her presence was causing unnecessary friction among the partners. "No, Renee," Marcus interrupted, looking her directly in the eye. "It was my fault. I let her feel isolated. I let her believe she wasn't worthy of respect. And I stood by while people insulted her dignity. I lost the only authentic person in this entire building." Without waiting for a response, Marcus stepped into the elevator, descended to the underground garage, got into his car, and drove out into the freezing morning traffic. He was going to find her. He drove across the Hudson River to Jersey City. He did not possess her exact street address, as Elena had always kept her personal residence strictly private. All he had was a brief detail she had mentioned months ago in passing, that her small building was located near a corner laundromat that smelled of bleach and a small grocery store with a green canvas awning. It was an extraordinary sight. A high-profile corporate CEO in a tailored wool coat crawling slowly through the working-class streets of Jersey City, searching for a green awning. Passersby stared at his luxury vehicle as it passed, but Marcus did not care about appearances. He parked on a narrow side street, stepped out into the biting winter wind, and began searching on foot. He walked into a corner bodega. "Excuse me, do you know a young woman named Elena Ross? She has a 6-year-old son named Leo." The clerk shook his head. He tried a local bakery, a hardware store, and a diner. The answers were always the same: shakes of the head and indifferent shrugs. For 2 relentless hours, Marcus walked through the cold streets. His expensive leather shoes grew dusty, his ears burned from the freezing air, and his legs ached. He passed crumbling brick walk-ups, rusted fire escapes, and icy sidewalks, the hard, uncompromising world that Elena lived in every single day. Standing in that environment, he realized with profound clarity that her strength was not an accident. It was forged in a fire of daily survival. Finally, near the end of a narrow avenue lined with old 4-story brick buildings, Marcus spotted an elderly woman sweeping snow off her front steps with a corn straw broom. She moved slowly, favoring her right hip with a faint wince. Marcus walked up the icy steps. "Good morning, ma'am. I am searching for Elena Ross. Does she live in this building?" The old woman stopped sweeping, adjusted her coat collar, and looked Marcus up and down with sharp, suspicious gray eyes. "Who's asking? My name is Marcus Vance. I am her. I was her employer." The woman's eyes narrowed instantly. "Ah, the billionaire from the Manhattan skyscraper. Elena told me about you." She rested her hands on the broom handle and leaned forward. "Why are you here? Hasn't that poor girl endured enough judgment from your fancy world?" Marcus took a deep breath, removing his leather gloves. "I am here because I made a catastrophic mistake, ma'am. I allowed her to believe she didn't belong. I allowed cruel people to insult her honor, and I let her walk away thinking she didn't matter. I need to tell her that she is the most extraordinary person I have ever known." The old woman studied Marcus's face for a long, silent moment. She looked at his reddened ears, his dusty shoes, and the genuine, unvarnished pain in his dark eyes. "My name is Mrs. Gable," she said quietly, her tone softening slightly. "I've watched that child raise her boy on pennies and prayer for 3 years. She has a heart of pure gold, but she carries a steel spine. If you break her heart, Mr. Vance, there isn't a building in Manhattan tall enough to hide you from me." "I understand, Mrs. Gable," Marcus said sincerely. "I promise you, I only want to stand by her side." Mrs. Gable nodded slowly. She took a night shift job back at her old workplace, housekeeping at the Grand Royale Hotel on 44th Street in Manhattan. Her shift starts at 10 o'clock tonight. At 10:30 p.m., Marcus stood outside the service entrance of the Grand Royale Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. It was a modest mid-tier commercial hotel, a far cry from the luxury venues Marcus owned. The night air was freezing, and the faint smell of industrial detergent hung in the narrow alleyway. At 11 p.m., the heavy steel employee door opened. Elena stepped out into the cold night air, holding a paper cup of hot tea. She wore a simple gray housekeeping uniform buttoned to the collar, with her dark hair pulled back neatly. She closed her eyes for a brief second, breathing in the crisp air to clear her fatigue after hours of heavy cleaning. When she opened her eyes, she froze. Marcus was standing 10 feet away in the dimly lit alley, his hands tucked into his coat pockets, watching her with quiet intensity. "Marcus?" she whispered, her voice trembling in disbelief. "What? What are you doing here?" "I came to find the person who fixed my kitchen valve," Marcus said softly, taking a slow step forward. Elena looked down at her gray uniform, her face flushing with sudden vulnerability. "Marcus, please. I wrote you a letter. I explained everything. Look at me. I am a hotel cleaner. I make $12 an hour wiping down rooms. Your world eats people like me alive. You saw what happened at that dinner." "I saw one arrogant person say something foolish," Marcus said firmly, stepping closer until he stood directly before her. "One person who doesn't mean a thing." "It isn't just one person, Marcus," Elena cried softly, tears welling in her eyes. "It's the board, the executives, the entire social circle you live in. They look at me and see a charity case who doesn't belong. And they are right. They are completely wrong," Marcus stated with deep conviction. "My mother cleaned diner tables her entire life so I could have a future. She scrubbed floors so I could eat. She was the strongest person I knew until I met you." Elena turned her face away, wiping a stray tear with the back of her calloused hand. "Elena, look at me," Marcus requested gently. She turned her eyes back to his. "I am not asking you to change who you are to fit into my world," Marcus said, his voice filled with raw, unreserved truth. "I am asking you to let me be a part of yours. The world where you wake up at 4 in the morning, work 3 jobs, raise an incredible son, fix broken pipes, and never give up. I want to stand beside you in that world. Not above you, not protecting you from a distance, but right next to you as an equal partner." Elena stared at him, her chest heaving, searching his dark eyes for any sign of hesitation or falsehood. She searched his face the way she would inspect a mechanical line, looking for the crack, the flaw, the weakness that would fail under pressure. She found nothing except absolute, unwavering truth. A wet, broken laugh escaped Elena's lips, a sound born of immense relief and overwhelming emotion. "That is a completely irrational business, Mr. Chavance," she whispered. "It is the best decision I have ever made in my entire life," Marcus replied, with a warm, genuine smile. They stood together in the freezing alleyway outside the employee door, shoulder to shoulder, as the city hummed softly around them. It was not a luxury penthouse, nor a high-society gala. It was a quiet alley smelling of laundry bleach, but it was the most honest place either of them had ever known. Elena did not return to Vance Hospitality Ventures as Marcus's personal assistant. She was very clear about that boundary from the beginning. "I am not going back to answering your phones or scheduling your calendar, Marcus," she stated firmly. "That was never the right position for me, and we both know it." Marcus agreed completely. He had already devised a structural role that matched her true talents. Vance Hospitality possessed a facilities operations department, a specialized team managing building systems, emergency repairs, and equipment standards across all corporate properties. It was not a glamorous department, but it was the operational backbone of the entire company. Elena took charge of the department as Facilities Operations Manager. Her job was to conduct site inspections, audit contractor bids, and oversee mechanical infrastructure. It was not a favor or an act of charity. It was a position earned through proven technical capability, and Elena excelled at it from her very first day. At the same time, Marcus enrolled Elena in an advanced industrial systems and building maintenance certification program at a local community college. It was a rigorous 12-month evening program covering HVAC systems, electrical codes, and commercial plumbing hydraulics. 2 nights a week, after finishing her shift at the office, Elena attended classes. She came home with her notebooks filled with blue-line schematics and code references. She was turning her raw mechanical instincts into accredited professional expertise. Gradually, the atmosphere at the corporate office transformed. Renee Whitfield, who had once questioned Elena's background, became one of her strongest professional advocates. One afternoon, Renee overheard Elena on the phone with a commercial contractor who was attempting to overcharge for a routine boiler repair. Elena's voice was calm, precise, and unyielding. "That is a $40 brass pressure valve, and you know it. I will not approve a $600 invoice for a 15-minute installation. Send me an accurate estimate by 4 o'clock, or I will replace your contract with a firm that respects honest pricing." Renee stood in the doorway, listened quietly, and nodded in profound approval. Later that afternoon, when a board member asked her opinion on the new facilities manager, Renee replied simply, "She is the most efficient, cost-effective, and honest manager this company has hired in 10 years. 6 months after her return, on a quiet Sunday evening, Marcus invited Elena back to his Tribeca penthouse. It was only the second time she had stepped inside the residence. The first time, she had walked in as a nervous applicant and fixed a leaking kitchen faucet before sitting down for an interview. The penthouse looked visually similar. The floor-to-ceiling glass, the white marble, and the panoramic view of the Hudson River. But the atmosphere was entirely different. On the long kitchen island sat 2 coffee mugs instead of 1. Marcus reached into his desk drawer near the sink and pulled out a small, worn object. He held it up between his thumb and index finger. It was a misshapen, black rubber washer, the exact seal Elena had extracted from his leaking faucet the morning they met. "You kept it?" Elena asked, genuinely surprised. "It is the most important reminder I possess," Marcus said gently, setting the washer on the counter. "It reminds me every day that the most valuable quality in a human being is paying attention." They sat together on the leather sofa, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in his life, Marcus shared the full, unedited story of his mother, Gloria Vance. He spoke of her exhausting shifts at the diner, her silent health struggles, and the devastating morning she collapsed on the grease-stained floor when he was 15 years old. "I built this billion-dollar empire because I was terrified," Marcus confessed, his deep voice cracking with long-suppressed emotion. "I believed that if I wasn't wealthy enough, I wouldn't be able to protect the people I cared about. And when I met you, Elena, you scared me because you possessed her exact strength, her stubborn pride, and her refusal to ask for help." A single tear rolled down Marcus's cheek, the first tear he had shed in over 20 years. Elena did not offer empty platitudes or tell him to stop crying. She simply sat beside him, wrapped her hand around his calloused fingers, and stayed. That night, inside the expansive penthouse high above the city, neither of them felt alone anymore. 1 year later, Marcus showed up at Elena's original studio apartment in Jersey City. It was the evening before she and Leo were scheduled to move into a bright 2-bedroom apartment near a quiet park. The studio was mostly packed into cardboard boxes, with the narrow futon still sitting against the plaster wall. Marcus walked into the small room, looked at the faded cotton curtain, the cracked plaster ceiling, and the steel toolbox sitting in the corner. Then he walked over to the sagging futon, reached into his jacket pocket and knelt down on one knee. Elena's breath hitched in her throat. Marcus opened a small velvet box, revealing a simple, beautifully crafted diamond ring. "Elena," he said, his eyes filled with quiet devotion, "I don't want to give you a new identity. I want to share the life you built with your own hands. You built a life of dignity right here on this futon, on cold coffee, 3 hours of sleep, and the tools your father left you. I don't need you to change for my world. I just need you to let me sit beside you on this broken sofa for the rest of my life. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. She looked at the ring, looked at her young son standing by the curtain, and smiled. Yes, Marcus, yes. Leo ran out from behind the curtain, cheering, and threw his arms around Marcus's neck. The three of them sat together on the old futon, holding each other tight in the quiet apartment. Their wedding took place the following May. It was not hosted in a high-society hotel ballroom, nor was it covered by fashion magazines. It was an intimate ceremony held in a vibrant community garden in Jersey City, 3 blocks from Elena's old apartment. Mrs. Gable sat in the front row, wearing a bright blue dress and dabbing tears from her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Renee Whitfield sat nearby, smiling warmly as a true friend. The doorman from Marcus's Tribeca building was there as an invited guest, having long since apologized to Elena for his initial harsh judgment. When Elena walked down the garden aisle, she wore a simple, elegant white dress. She carried no traditional flower bouquet. Instead, in her left hand, she held her father's original 6-inch pipe wrench, wrapped neatly in a white silk ribbon. The tool she had used 1,000 times to fix what others overlooked. They exchanged handwritten vows. Elena looked into Marcus's eyes and said, "I promise to fix what is broken, to protect our family, and to pay attention to what truly matters every single day." Marcus replied, "I promise to stop trying to save the world alone, and to show up for the people who matter, starting with you, today and forever." 6 months after the wedding, Elena and Marcus established Pops's Workshop, a free vocational training foundation located in a renovated warehouse in Jersey City. The hand-painted sign above the door read, "Pops's Workshop. Learn to fix machines. Learn to build your life." The center provided free accredited training in commercial plumbing, electrical systems, and building maintenance to single mothers and disadvantaged youth. Elena designed the curriculum herself, teaching classes 3 days a week, wearing her work boots and tool belt. She knelt beside her students on the concrete floor, showing them how to read a valve seat, trace an electrical circuit, and hold a wrench so it would never slip. She taught them with patience, respect, and the firm belief that technical skill is the foundation of human dignity. One afternoon, a young woman walked through the workshop doors. Her clothes were worn, her shoes were scuffed, and her eyes carried the deep, familiar fatigue of someone struggling to survive. "Can you teach me?" the young woman asked quietly. "I don't have a degree. I don't have anything." Elena looked at her, smiled warmly, and pulled out a chair. "Sit down. Let me tell you a story about a leaking kitchen valve." Marcus watched from the workshop doorway, his heart full. He realized that true wealth was never measured by corporate portfolios, glass penthouses, or fictional headlines. It was measured by character, by what you choose to do when no one is watching, and by having the courage never to walk past something broken when you have the hands to fix it. If you are facing struggles right now, remember this: your worth is not defined by a printed resume, a social class, or the clothes you wear. Your character is forged in your actions, your resilience, and your willingness to pay attention.